Meg Ryan earned $15 million for a single film at a time when almost no actress in Hollywood could make that demand and get it. She grossed over $670 million from just 4 movies. Audiences loved her the way they love something they believe in, not just enjoy, and that kind of trust takes years to build. It took tabloids about 6 months to destroy it. What happened to Meg Ryan in the early 2000s was not a career slowdown. It was a demolition, and almost all of it was built on a story that was only half true. She was born Margaret Hyra on November 19, 1961, in Fairfield, Connecticut. Her mother had been an actress and a teacher, her father a teacher as well, and when she decided to pursue acting seriously, she took her maternal grandmother's maiden name and became Meg Ryan, a name that would eventually mean something specific to an entire generation of moviegoers. She studied at the University of Connecticut before transferring to New York University, and left 1 semester before graduating to chase film roles, a risk that ends most acting careers before they start. Hers did not end. It launched. Her first real training ground was the soap opera As the World Turns, where she played Betsy Stewart Montgomery Andropoulos from 1982 to 1984. Soap operas demand speed, consistency, and emotional range on a brutal schedule, and Ryan absorbed all of it. The film break arrived in 1986 with Top Gun, the Tom Cruise action phenomenon that reshaped American cinema. She played Carol Bradshaw, wife to Anthony Edwards' character Goose, and though it was not a leading role, the film reached so many people that directors and producers started paying attention to her in a different way. 3 years later, when Harry Met Sally gave America the version of Meg Ryan, it would not stop wanting. Released in 1989, the film cast her as Sally Albright with a precision that made the comedy feel lived in and the emotion feel earned. That Golden Globe nomination was her first, and it would not be her last recognition, though the industry's affection for her work came and went, depending on how well she fit the image they had decided she should maintain. The 1990s belonged to her in a way that few actresses have ever owned a decade. Sleepless in Seattle, French Kiss, and You've Got Mail followed, and her romantic comedy partnership with Tom Hanks became one of the great on-screen pairings of that era, built on a chemistry so natural that audiences forgot they were watching performances. She was not content to stay in the romantic comedy lane she had mastered. In 1994, When a Man Loves a Woman placed her in the role of an alcoholic high school guidance counselor, a dramatic stretch that earned a Screen Actors Guild Award nomination and proved that the warmth audiences loved in her could carry weight in darker material. City of Angels arrived in 1998 alongside You've Got Mail, and she was everywhere at once, bankable in multiple genres, trusted by audiences across a wide range, and commanding a salary that reflected all of it. $15 million for Proof of Life. That number was uncommon for anyone in Hollywood at the time, male or female, and it positioned her alongside the industry's most powerful names. She had even turned down the role of Clarice Starling in The Silence of the Lambs, a part that went to Jodie Foster and delivered an Academy Award. Ryan's priorities pointed elsewhere. She knew what her audience wanted and for a decade delivered it without fail. Before any of this came apart, there was Dennis Quaid. He was not a minor figure when they met. His credits included The Right Stuff, and when they first crossed paths on the set of Inner Space in 1987, he was arguably the more recognized of the two. Something shifted when they reunited for DOA in 1988. The relationship moved quickly, and plans to marry in 1990 stalled when Quaid admitted to Ryan that he had been using illicit substances regularly. That confession could have finished everything and instead sent him to rehab. He got clean, the wedding was rescheduled, and they married on Valentine's Day in 1991. Their son, Jack Quaid, arrived on April 24, 1992, and would eventually build his own acting career in The Hunger Games and the television series The Boys. The marriage did not hold. Quaid later described his addiction at its worst, telling the Sunday Times that at its height he consumed a very large amount of substances per day and experienced what he called a white light moment, seeing his own death clearly enough to choose recovery. He got clean and stayed clean, but the marriage had already absorbed damage that sobriety alone could not repair. Fame complicated everything further, because as Ryan's career accelerated and Quaid's plateaued, the gap between their public profiles widened into something painful. He admitted in a 2018 NBC interview with Megyn Kelly that when they walked the streets of New York together, people shouted Ryan's name and he felt like he simply disappeared. He called himself small for feeling that way, but the honesty in that admission captures exactly how corrosive that kind of imbalance becomes over years inside a marriage. They announced their separation in June 2000, and the divorce was finalized in 2001. But the timeline became contested territory almost immediately because of what was unfolding on the set of Proof of Life. Russell Crowe had entered the picture. The tabloids assembled their story quickly. America's sweetheart had abandoned her marriage for a volatile Australian actor known more for his temper than his tenderness, and that version of events spread faster than any correction could follow. Ryan pushed back in October 2000, telling W magazine that the marriage had already dissolved before the press found something to print about, insisting that neither she nor Dennis had been cavalier about the breakup. But in 2006, speaking to Oprah Winfrey, she described the marriage as very unhealthy, saying she probably should have left much earlier, drawing a picture of a relationship that had been functionally over long before the paperwork confirmed it. Crowe was already one of the most recognized actors on the planet when they met, his reputation built on physical intensity on screen and a personal volatility that generated its own press coverage. On the set of Proof of Life, his character was scripted to develop romantic feelings for Ryan's character, and behind the cameras, those feelings became something real. By July 2000, before the divorce from Quaid was finalized, photographs showed Ryan and Crowe leaving Tom Cruise's Mission Impossible 2 premiere party holding hands, and the tabloid machinery ran that image into the ground. Friends who witnessed the relationship described two people completely absorbed by each other. One told People magazine they had great conversations, emailed constantly, and that Crowe called her all the time. Another described Ryan as extremely infatuated with him, and the two were seen together across London during filming, across California, and across Australia, even pretending to house hunt together in what one friend called a sweet charade that fooled nobody. Crowe would point at properties and ask which one she liked, and she would answer, the whole scene playing out in public while the divorce proceedings continued in the background. The relationship lasted less than a year. By Christmas 2000, they were on separate continents and the romance was finished. A crew member from the film described it to People magazine as a typical co-star fling, but a closer friend of Ryan's said Crowe had wanted far more than that. According to this friend, he wanted to marry her and have children, and his attention reflected that intensity. He gave her gifts including a 1963 Buick antique car and a puppy. Gestures the friend described as too much too soon, overwhelming in a way that pushed Ryan back rather than drawing her closer. Geography sealed the rest. Crowe lived in Australia and Ryan in Los Angeles, and in February 2001 he told the Herald-Sun that he could not sustain himself through a year without going home, and that Meg needed the same. He called her a beautiful and courageous woman, and said he grieved the loss of her company without losing her friendship. Ryan's reputation did not survive the coverage so cleanly. The actress who had built her career on warmth and relatability was now being labeled a homewrecker in the same publications that had once celebrated her, and the industry that had paid her $15 million a film began to pull back. What followed was a string of projects that could not recover what the scandal had cost her. In the Cut, an erotic thriller directed by Jane Campion released in 2003, brought in only $23 million worldwide. Against the Ropes, a boxing drama released in 2004, opened to just $3 million in its first weekend. The actress who had once commanded the box office was struggling to get audiences to show up. The most damaging moment in terms of public perception came in October 2003, when she sat across from Michael Parkinson on his British talk show to promote In the Cut. Parkinson pressed her aggressively from the start, questioning her choices, implying that her personal life had driven her toward darker material, and framing the entire conversation as an interrogation rather than a celebrity interview. Ryan gave short answers, looked visibly uncomfortable, and eventually told him to wrap it up. Parkinson called her behavior unforgivable afterward, and a 2006 British poll ranked the encounter third on a list of the most shocking chat show moments in television history. For years, the narrative held Ryan as the difficult one and Parkinson as the wronged host. That changed in 2021 when Parkinson gave an interview to Radio Times admitting he had been obviously angry with her, that directing anger toward a guest was not his place, and that he had come across as pompous. Asked what he would say to her today, his answer was 2 words: "I'm sorry." Ryan's response, shared in a 2024 Times of London interview, was that she did not know who that man was to begin with and did not need to think about him again. After Against the Ropes, she stepped away from Hollywood entirely for nearly 3 years, telling the New York Times Magazine she was burned out and felt like she was standing behind a window looking at her own life. When the public attention returned, it focused on her appearance, with speculation about cosmetic procedures circulating widely after a 2023 appearance at a documentary screening. Ryan has never confirmed or denied any procedures. In a 2023 Glamour magazine interview, she said she could not pay attention to the chatter and that meanness was simply unnecessary, then added that with age comes the ability to say what you mean without calculating how it will land. She returned to film in 2023 with What Happens Later, a romantic comedy she co-wrote and directed, working entirely on her own terms. As of 2024, she has no confirmed partner. She adopted a daughter from China, originally named Charlotte, and later renamed Daisy to better fit her personality, and has been working with CARE, a philanthropy organization focused on ending poverty through women's economic empowerment. Crowe has been in a relationship since 2020 with Brittany Theot, whom he first met on the set of Broken City in 2013. In 2025, he told 60 Minutes he had no intention of marrying again, describing his life as joyous and saying, with characteristic bluntness, that a wedding would only ruin it. The story the tabloids assembled about Meg Ryan and Russell Crowe was not wrong in every detail, but it was built from the most damaging pieces of a more complicated truth, and the woman at its center paid a price far out of proportion to what actually happened. She said in one interview that being labeled a Scarlet Woman was, for all its pain, also liberating, because once the public had decided what you were, you stopped needing their approval to know who you were. She recalled walking through a hotel lobby in London and feeling the room go silent as people stared, and instead of falling apart, she started laughing. The disapproval had lost its power over someone who already knew herself.